But good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's coffee chat. This morning, I have with me some folks that I'm sure you're now getting very familiar with, and that is Mr. Jason Taylor, Assistant Superintendent. He is, of course, overseeing Human Resources and Health Services. And also with him today is Mrs. Amy Norman, she's the head of our Health Services. Also remotely, there is Dr. Bill Long, Assistant Superintendent of Operations, and Dr. Nora Hoover, also Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, and then finally Stacy Conrad, who will be our facilitator for the meeting today and moderate the questions and answers. Just as a reminder, please use the Q&A box for your questions. Stacy will be working through those and trying to get us those questions that we can answer today. Hopefully we can answer most of those questions for you today. If not, we'll follow up with them later, as we always do. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted online later today as well. And the purpose of our meeting today is to go through our back to school plan, in particularly some updates to the plan based on some of the issues that we're having in regards to COVID-19. And we're going to start out this morning. Mr. Taylor is going to share with you the recommendations of the changes to the plan that we're going to present to the school board on Thursday night. I want to thank everyone for all the emails that you've been sending with your suggestions and concerns. Those have been shared with everyone that's involved in the decision process. We have shared all those, and I know that the board has responded to some, but I believe that I've responded to all. I do still have, I just looked this morning, about 100-ish now emails that I haven't had a chance to get back to just on this issue. So hopefully I get that done today and get back with all of you. School board meeting will be held on Thursday, tomorrow. So I know for some of you, I'm sorry, I accidentally said the 20th. I guess that's what I get for answering emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. But it's actually the 26th, Thursday the 26th at 7 p.m. at the high school cafeteria. And just as usual, there will be a sign-up sheet out front. Mrs. Pam Parker, our school board secretary, will be, I'm sorry, my secretary will be there taking the names. It's really important that you fill out the sheet completely, and I'll share more about that at the end of this meeting. But we'll jump right into the changes and let Mr. Taylor take it from here. So, Jason.
Thank you, Dr. Arkanoff. We can go on to the next slide. In all of our conversations with the school board and the administration, we've approached it with our number one goal, and that is to keep students in our schools in a face-to-face learning environment. That's our number one goal this school year. That's what we've been trying to work towards throughout the past few months, and that's something we want to continue to work towards. And so as you see and hear the recommended changes, it's with that goal in mind. We currently are a little worried about our ability to offer face-to-face schooling for all of our students, and we need to get back to the point where we feel confident we can do that in a safe manner. And so we felt like, based off some data you're going to see later in the presentation, that it was time to make some adjustments to our back-to-school plan in order to maintain this goal. Next. So again, just restating that we believe that in-person learning provided by our exceptional teachers is the best way for our students to learn. And we want to make sure that that can happen on a daily basis. Unfortunately, 3 weeks into the school year here, we have some risks that are impacting our ability to provide that traditional learning environment. We currently have more positive cases in the first 3 weeks of school than we had in the first 3 months of school last year. And that's a really big difference if you think about what we went through last year. Even though we were wearing masks, how long it felt like that drug out. We've done that in the first really 3 weeks of school, and it continues to grow. Last week alone, because of those number of cases. We saw 594 quarantines or isolations. These are students who are not able to come to school because they've either been contact traced and identified as possible contacts, or they have symptoms and they're remaining at home. When we hit this number last year, even a lower number, that triggered us to go to e-learning, especially in our secondary schools, and to move to the hybrid model, the blended model. We don't really want that to happen this year. Again, our goal is to keep every student in school face-to-face as much as we can this school year. And with that those two kind of risks, it's really becoming very difficult. On top of that, some of our buildings' total absence rates are approaching the 20% threshold. And that's something we're concerned about any year. That's not just COVID that we worry about that. That's something that Ms. Norman and her team do monitor. And when we hit the 20% threshold, she has to notify the Indiana Department of Health and then work with our local county health department to really investigate why are our schools missing that many students that day. And we do throw out things like, college visit days and those types of things. These are students who are ill. They're illness-related absences. What we're finding out is that students are staying home, which we love, and we're happy they are, because they're trying to protect their peers. And so they're staying at home because they might have symptoms, and they want to take a day or two to make sure that those symptoms aren't COVID related, or they're waiting on a test result, or whatever it might be. But we're starting to get concerned. And when you're a teacher and 1/5 of your classroom is not in the room, that's very tough to manage. That's something that you have to change. You can't just teach to the 4/5 that are in the room. You've also got to now think about what's this 1/5 really need at home to keep up and to keep learning with the rest of the class. And then finally, one thing that's a growing concern, and we had this concern last year, is our number of staff quarantines and isolations have risen each week this school year. This isn't just vaccinated or unvaccinated staff members. That's not the issue. We have vaccinated staff members who are unfortunately becoming positive with COVID-19, and they have to isolate then for that period of time. And so that's not something that's behavior that's caused that. It's just simply what's going on right now in our buildings. And these 4 risks are things we're going to talk about through this presentation, and why we are making the recommendations to the school board to make some changes to the back to school plan. So we want to hit right up front and early here. This is a summary slide of the changes we're going to talk about as we move through the presentation. Probably the biggest change, and it's bullet point number 1 there, is that we are going to put in some recommendations and some requirements for face coverings to be worn. This is going to be while students are indoors and while they're on the bus. We will watch our positive cases, and that's some of those numbers I talked about on the last slide. As our positive cases exceed 1% in a building, we're going to strongly recommend that building wear face coverings to kind of curb that spread. This is in line with what the Johnson County Health Department released last week. This kind of follows their model of looking at positive cases. We've decided to strongly recommend and to let folks know that, hey, we're at 1% in your school. You need to think about, if you wear some face coverings, could that prevent us from going to the next step? And that next step is when we hit 2%, we're going to require that face coverings be worn and that they continue to be worn until that building falls back below the 1% level. We've been watching our cases over the past few weeks. We think these are very good recommended percentages from the county. They seem to correspond when we really get nervous about a building and whether or not we can continue to keep it open. And so we feel like these are really good recommendations. This would be at a building level. This isn't a corporation change at this time. This is something that as a building reaches that threshold, we would make the change. Now currently, and this is unfortunate, we've had to close some classrooms because they've had 3, 4, 5, or 6 cases at times. And what we want to say here is just be clear to individuals that, and to the community, that an entire classroom could be quarantined if we have 3 or more cases. The state's recommended 1 or 2, depending on which guidance you look at. We feel like once we hit that 3rd, that's when we work with the county to decide, is this really appropriate? Should we move this class to an e-learning situation, both the teacher and the students, so that we can allow that spread to kind of slow down. They still would be allowed to come back with enhanced precautions. So it's not a 14-day closure, but it is something that we've had to do, unfortunately, already, and we will need to continue to do. Again, keeping the closures and the impact to traditional learning at the smallest level there. Moving beyond the classroom though, if the wearing of face coverings doesn't curb the spread, or if we have some other significant spread, and that causes our total absences to exceed that 20% threshold, that's where we might look to close an entire building or to move them to e-learning for a period of time to kind of reset everything, get a chance for the spread to calm down and slow down so that we can bring everyone back and everyone can learn in the same modality. That's something we hope we don't ever have to do this year. But it is something that unfortunately we've had to start talking about because our numbers are growing at a rate that seems to be really impacting our ability to not take that step. And so what you're seeing in these updates is to avoid that right there. We don't want to close any building. We don't want to close a classroom. That's not what we're here to do. We said in our first goal, we really want our kids in our buildings. And so with that in mind, we thought, so what's something we could do between where we stand today and that point? And that's where we landed on the face covering recommendations and requirements, is to give us an opportunity to pull something maybe that wasn't on the table, put it on the table and give it a chance to see, could that help us keep kids in school? As we move a building into 2%, if a building moves over 2% positive cases, we also would make some changes then to after school and extracurricular activities. We would ask that individuals that are spectating at those events that are indoors, that they wear a face covering. And that would also apply to anyone who's not participating in the activity. So we're not limiting capacity at this time. We are just asking that, again, take a preventative measure so that we can continue to enjoy our extracurricular activities and our students can this school year. Wanted to make a point of this because we've talked about this, and I think we talked about it in the last week's coffee chat, is just a reminder that per the Department of Health, the Indiana Department of Health, antibody testing is no longer allowed to avoid quarantine. And so that's not something we're able to honor. They were very clear when they gave that message to us. And we wanted to just make a point and remind you of that. And then we've also been allowing volunteers and visitors in our buildings. We're going to continue right now, but we're going to remove that exemption for face coverings from those individuals. If you're a volunteer or visitor in our buildings, we're going to ask you to wear a face covering as long as Johnson County is not in the blue advisory level. And once a building reaches 2%, we might limit all the volunteers and visitors either altogether or really reduce it down to just the bare bone essential volunteers and visitors that we need to make education work that day. Again, that's a protection we can offer our students to keep them in school by doing that. I'll pause there. Is anything I missed, Dr. Arkanoff or Ms. Norman, that you'd like to add on this slide? This is kind of the biggest slide of the presentation, so I want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of hits the that hits where things are. As we were talking, and I think we're going to have more slides that kind of address that, is that we are seeing not only an increase in our positive cases, but also an increase in our absences, and that is something that is concerning. And I think that the strong recommendation as far as wearing face coverings can kind of help us get things back to where we need to be so that we can be having learning in our buildings where we all have decided, I think everybody is in agreement that that's the best way for kids to learn.
Yeah. So as we move forward in the presentation, we have some visuals, and I want to give Ms. Norman a chance to share those, because I'll be honest, folks, when I say things like we've had more positive cases in 3 weeks than 3 months, that means Ms. Norman's work from last year really got condensed and her team's work did. And so I really want to give her a chance to kind of explain, this is what we're seeing every day. This is the data at Center Grove schools. This isn't the CDC, the state, or the county. This is what we see every day in our schools. And so we'll go on to the next slide. Ms. Norman, if you just kind of walk us through some of these charts and graphs, I'd really appreciate that.
Sure. If you kind of look and see what we're looking at, we kind of are beginning with that first week of school that we started, we had 2 cases. And as you can see, we've just kind of exponentially been growing since then. Last week in particular, we hit just shy of 100 cases. The data here for this week, starting with Mondays, we are just to Wednesday. We have not added Wednesday's data at all yet, but we had 55 cases as of Tuesday last night at approximately, I think I quit counting at 5 p.m. last night. So, we are easily going to be over the 98 cases, honestly, probably today or tomorrow, as we continue to see this, as we continue to increase in these cases. And again, these are reported cases. This is information that is provided to us by families. It's provided to us by the Johnson County Health Department. And so we are just kind of seeing this continue to grow and blossom, unfortunately. And looking ahead, so this shows kind of the thresholds of where we are at, and as far as based on enrollment at each of our schools. This is the 1% threshold for positive cases and the 2% threshold. As you can see, the current positive cases as of last night, we are 1 case away at Pleasant Grove from hitting the 2% threshold. We're 1 case away at Middle School North from hitting that threshold. So we are definitely very close, and we will hit the 2% threshold, I'm confident, this week, possibly at least 2, probably 3 schools. So these are things that we're seeing. And, is it indicative of spread in the buildings? Is it indicative of spread in the community? I think that our schools are a reflection of our community. There obviously is significant spread going on across the state, not just Johnson County. And so that is going to be reflected in our buildings. We definitely have confirmed situations where we have close contacts who are testing positive. That is something that we really didn't see as much of last year. It did occur where this year, it definitely seems to be something that we are seeing an increase of. Unfortunately, when we make these close contact notifications, it's not uncommon for parents to respond with, well, my kid's actually not been feeling well. And that's new. That's not something that we dealt with last year. So I don't know what the next slide is. Okay, so this is kind of a look at where we were at last year. So the blue line kind of shows you our case counts through the first semester. The red line is where we are standing looking at week 3 of school. So as you can see, we've definitely had a rather dramatic change in the situation of what we're dealing with this year. And again, this is, last year, I think things moved a little bit slower. It was new. This year with this, the variant component of this does make things, I think, a little bit more complicated. It is more contagious. It's more similar to chickenpox and its ability to get transmitted to others. I think last year, the variants we were kind of dealing with was more of a 1-to-3 ratio of if you had an infected person, they likely would infect, 3 other people. The Delta variant, by all accounts, it's like 1-to-5 or 8. I think probably more closer to the 8 was the last information that I saw. So I think that that's attributable to kind of what we're seeing here. There we go. So this is a look at COVID-related absences. A couple of things to note. When you look at the blue line, we had quite a few absences related to COVID with much, much fewer cases. Last year, when we began the school year in the first semester, the quarantine guidance was different. It was a 6-foot radius, which equated to approximately a 1-to-9 ratio in a classroom. Whereas, now, so, in that 6-foot radius, if you would think about that, that would take out just a lot more people. Now, based on the guidance that we have, we are doing a 3-foot radius, which was what we utilized second semester last year. And that dramatically reduced down the quarantine numbers and those students who were affected. So it's now down to kind of a 1-to-3 or 4 ratio, depending on at the secondary level vaccination status, that can actually reduce those numbers down as well. But we are still seeing obviously an increase, and it has more to do with the COVID-related absences have more to do with the number of positive cases than it does the quarantines. We've had a dramatic increase in the number of cases. And when you consider that some of those will take out 0 kids, primarily because they weren't at school whenever their symptoms, based on how we determine close contact, they may not have been at school, so therefore not have exposed anyone. So that doesn't result in close contact at school. Also, the teachers have done a great job of trying to work with us. We have very tight spaces. School buildings were not meant to be socially distanced in the classrooms, but our teachers have worked really hard to try to kind of pod kids or work to spread them out as much as they can. We still encounter situations where some of our classrooms, we just cannot get to that 3-foot mark. So that will result in, 1 or 2 students being quarantined out of that class. But for the most part, we really have taken strides to focus on, if there's a close contact, we are very confident that there is a risk to your student that they could develop symptoms from this. And that is the reason why they're being quarantined. So. Yeah, so this is kind of looking at, so last year when we had 1 case, we averaged about 33 absences a case. This year so far, we're looking at about 3 students being quarantined. When you consider the high school, depending on how that close contact is measured, that can be 1 student could have, 3 to 4. If it affects both days of their schedule, then that kind of blooms that out to about 8 students, just because it affects both days. But for the most part, we are, attempting to really pinpoint these quarantines so that we are finding the students that again are most at risk. So.
Thank you, Ms. Norman. I appreciate that. Anything to add there?
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing is when we look at, again, with the COVID related absences, as much of it right now has to do with just the number of students who are sick, and that's kind of a component of that. I think the other part is, just overall absences, whether it's COVID related or not, has definitely increased tremendously. And I think those are both concerning as far as wanting to keep kids in school.
Thank you. So with that data in mind, go ahead and go to the next slide, Dr. Arkanoff. This is why we remain concerned, is that we've had to hit this first bullet already at some of our schools where we've had to quarantine an entire classroom and keep those students out for at least the 8-day period, if not longer, and the teacher as well. And so that's something we're trying to avoid. And the biggest reason is that we know that next section there, the 20% COVID-related absences really cause an issue when we're talking about an entire school moving to a quarantine status. That creates issues where our students have to make other arrangements to get fed in the morning or afternoon. We can't offer daily meal service as well as we could if they were physically in the building. While we'll make some opportunities available, we know that that's hard to participate in sometimes. We also know that our students need to be in our buildings so that their families can also contribute to our economy and can be out and working and taking care of what their families and their guardians need to do. And so it really concerns us that we're getting close to these thresholds where we may have to call the state and report that, hey, we're over 20%. And it's very likely they may say it's COVID related and you need to make a change to your learning mode. And if that were to happen, that's just something that we really don't want to happen this year. We really are trying hard to make sure it doesn't. So let's talk a little bit then on the next slide about why masks. We don't think masks are going to solve all our problems. We don't think vaccines are going to solve all of our issues. We know that people who are vaccinated are still contracting COVID. It's a much smaller number of people who would contract it. It's also a very much smaller number who would be hospitalized or even lose their life, unfortunately. But we know that there are protections we can put in place. And this is a chart that the state's provided us. And it really does a nice job of using slices of Swiss cheese to talk about, can we add some layers in so that if we put all these layers together, can we really prevent the spread? And you'll see we hadn't been using the mask as an option. And so we'd like to insert that as an option. We have been using some of these other things. Dr. Long's team has done a great job of upgrading our ventilation and our air filtration in our classrooms. We've done a great job of promoting hand hygiene and how to kind of spread students out. We also do use quarantines and isolation. So we have a lot of these slices of cheese to build a stronger layer of protection. We feel like it's time to add one more. And that's where you see the mask as an option in there. We know no one of these is going to solve our problem, but maybe all of them together would give us an opportunity to keep kids in our schools. One of those protections that's listed there is vaccines, and I'd like to show Dr. Arkanoff on the next slide that we still are thrilled and we are really excited to have some of the highest vaccination rates in our county for sure, and we're competing at the state level. And so you can kind of see the 3 zip codes that comprise Center Grove schools here, compose Center Grove schools, and how we're performing. And so those numbers have gone up 5 or 6% since we started showing them in July. And so our community is taking this seriously. They're taking on their protections to try to keep our schools open. It's unfortunately time for us to add another layer of protection to keep our schools in that manner. The next slide then kind of talks about, so how are these changes going to be made? And I'm going to kind of start this slide and then let Ms. Conrad share, how are we going to keep you informed of when we need to make a change? And so when we hit 1% in a building, we're going to send out communication. We're going to let families know that we're now strongly recommending that face coverings be worn. We're going to post this out on the website as well, but parents are going to kind of be told, or kind of be informed so that their students can start wearing those face coverings if they choose to, and can help us maybe not hit that 2% mark. When we hit the 2% mark, we can't just flip that on a dime. Sometimes we don't know that until the end of the day. It's 7, 8 o'clock at times. We're not going to ask parents to put a mask on their students the next morning. So what we'd like to do is, as we do discover that a building's hit that 2% threshold, the next day in the morning we communicate that home to everyone, and the following day is when we'd start the mask requirement or the face covering requirement. So you can kind of see an example there of, we found out Tuesday evening that a school hit 2%. Communication would be sent out Wednesday morning, and that requirement would start Thursday morning. Coming back off, a little bit of a time period there as well, because we know we could fluctuate up and down at that 1% level. So once a school or building drops below 1%, the example here is they drop Tuesday evening below 1%. And they remain below that for 1 week, we'd actually communicate that out that, hey, the next Wednesday, we will remove the face covering requirement. And so there's a little bit of a weak bubble there to make sure that we truly have curbed that spread and we can return back to the way things started the school year. And so, Ms. Conrad, did I miss anything on that chart? And then if not, I know the next few slides kind of talk about how we're communicating at home. I'd love for you to share some of that if you could.
Sure. So we will be using Parent Square, and Parent Square is tied to your Skyward account. So make sure that your updated cell phone number and email address is in Skyward. If you notice in Parent Square, you have the wrong email address or the wrong phone number, that needs to be updated in Skyward. It syncs every single night. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide. There we go. Yeah, that's you, Jason.
Oh, I was going to give you a chance because you made such a great graphic here. Just kind of share. So this is kind of a visual of what we've covered today, and how our face covering protocols would play out. And so if we remain below 1%, which a number of our schools are in, we'd remain optional. Once we move into that 1 to 2% lane, we would strongly recommend. And then above 2%, we'd require. With the federal mandate, school buses have always been required. And then we've also asked now that our visitors inside of our school clinics and anyone coming back on enhanced precautions, they will wear a mask as well. So you kind of see a nice visual here on when face coverings would be required and when they would not be. Go ahead, Ms. Conrad, if you can share on this one.
Sure. So this is our dashboard. I think a lot of you have found it. We did go ahead and add a COVID-19 channel to the top of the district homepage. So you can find it there. If you look on the top corner up there, just click on COVID-19. All of our schools also have that rotator that's on the main page, and your site shortcuts also include COVID-19 information. So if you scroll down to the middle of your page, you'll be able to find that on all of the school websites. And then Jason, if you want to go through how we're counting COVID cases and COVID related absences, there's a little bit of confusion related to what is a current COVID case and the number of cases that we have on this dashboard. We're going to be introducing a new dashboard that will include those COVID positive cases. And I think that's a little bit confusing to people.
Thank you. Yeah, so a positive case for us is going to start when we're notified that the student was positive. And then there's a 10-day isolation window when they'll be out and absent from school. Each of those 10 days, they would count in our counts. And so Ms. Norman's tracking that. And we will, so if I have a case that starts tomorrow, that would remain in our counts for 10 days before it drops off. And so that's why you'll see that when we talk about our current positive cases, that's what we really mean. It's any student who is still isolated for a COVID positive. A COVID-related absence, that's really a combination of two different groups of people. One of those would be folks who are isolating, either because they are positive or they have symptoms and they need to be out. And the other one would be that we've identified them as a close contact here at school. And so they would be either on their 8, 11, or 15-day absence there. We do the COVID-related absences weekly. We kind of bundle all that up into one count at the end of the week because it does ebb and flow a lot day to day. And sometimes it's a really low number. Cases, on the other hand, is something that we will track daily and nightly, and we will publish that on this new dashboard. Did I get all that right, Ms. Norman?
Yeah, I think so. I think the other thing to kind of remember is that when we look at the COVID-related absences and quarantines, those numbers are not just what has occurred as a close contact at school. We also are contacted because people have close contact outside of school, and they're reporting that, and their students are not going to be at school. So all of those are encompassed in that COVID-related absence. So those numbers, what is related to a close contact and students, because they were, contact traced through school, is added into all of the other information that we also then are also receiving from families. For example, if they have an elementary student who is tested positive, that will affect other students who are in their home that are, will impact maybe the middle school and the high school or the elementary school again. So, it's kind of a culmination of all of those things. So.
Thank you. I think our next slide is just kind of a summary of what we've covered. This is also a graphic that you'll see on the website. This is kind of an update to that graphic. And this shares, again, the strongly recommended when we go above 1%, required above 2%, until we drop back down. And then the requirement for visitors, clinics, that's on there, along with the federal mandate. We still will continue social distancing. Like we said earlier, our teachers have done a great job with that. That's helped us keep our quarantine numbers low. We don't feel like we have a very large quarantine issue right now or close contact issue. The problem is we have so many cases that it's compounding those numbers. But we really do feel like we're targeting just the right students that possibly were close contacts. Volunteers and visitors and rentals, that's changed a little bit too. We want to make sure that the masks are worn when we're outside of that blue advisory level, and that at some point we might have to limit that outright. Again, can't share enough credit with our custodial staff and our building and maintenance crew that the enhanced cleaning that they've done has allowed us to mitigate the spread as much as possible. Cleaning those high touch areas, putting in those UV light filters and air filtration systems. All that's really helped make our schools the safest air environment and physical environment that our students could be in. We will add some slight changes there on extra co-curricular activities. Doesn't really impact the participants as much as it would folks who are maybe on the sidelines or definitely spectators. Those are kind of the changes right now. And then I don't think there's any change on the last one. So Dr. Arkoff, you want to hit the board meeting one more time, and then we can, I think that's all of our slides we have for today.
Yeah. Before we do that, a couple of things that I wanted to kind of touch on again, just in case folks missed it. But one was the quarantine numbers and the case numbers, and I could go back to that slide. I think it's important to kind of talk a little bit about this and maybe just get some clarity for folks. And so Jason, Amy, I'll ask you this question. When I look at this slide, I see that last year being the blue line, that we had 418 absences. We're saying COVID related, so mostly quarantine absences. And then that was based on how many cases? Was that like
if we go back to the slide before that, I think that was based on about 7 or 8 cases.
So about 7 or 8 cases last year resulted
in about 418 quarantined. Yes.
And so even though when we look at it this year, our number of quarantines and cases are 519, and I'm sorry, of absences, but that's out of 103 cases. So
Correct.
things have gotten better in the contact tracing world from the social distancing
Yes.
and
Yes.
of course some of the precautions. I imagine the vaccines are helping as well. So
Yes, I mean, it's encouraging when we get, I get the list of students that have been contact traced, and then we start checking vaccination status, and we're able to, there might be 10 or 12 kids on the list, but 6 or 8 of them have been vaccinated, and that makes a huge difference.
yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that, because that's really good. I know you work really hard to make sure when you're going through that contact tracing that you're doing everything you can to make sure the kid can stay in school.
Right. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
and I'll be honest, this year it's, there's a lot more factors that go into that.
Yeah.
The combination of more cases and then more factors to check has made it, we are still committed to that. If we find out about a case on today, we will be contact tracing that case today and making those notifications today. I know that at times those notifications have come a little later in the day than probably I would like. However, I want to make sure that, one, that we're accurate in what we have. So when they go out, those have been checked and double checked. We've had we are trying to keep this down so that people are not being notified if they truly shouldn't be notified.
Great, thank you. One of the other things, I'll go back to this slide. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we've based this, the changes that we're saying here based on the input from the Johnson County Health Department. A lot of this 1% and 2% came from them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So,
yeah, they provided those thresholds last week when they started seeing similar spread in other corporations in our county. And so we've kind of adapted the 1% and 2% and added language, the strongly recommended and required. They're not at a point where they can mandate masks, but they've used, I think, the strongest words they can to say, we strongly recommend that you follow this recommendation. And so that's where I think it's really weighed on us, and couple that with our attendance and absences that we're getting very worried about, that we may have to switch learning modes, that we felt like that 1% and 2% threshold could help us.
Great. Okay, and then I know, I can't remember if we touched on this a little bit or not, but I know one of the biggest issues that we've been dealing with from a complexity factor has been the enhanced precautions. And if we could just kind of talk about that for a moment. Sure. I think we heard from our administrators how difficult that's kind of been, and our nurses are sharing that as well.
Yeah, there's a slide if you want to scroll well down through the presentation, Rich, Dr. Argoff. It's green. It's got some green boxes on it. It is a supporting slide we had ready for today if needed. Just coming up here.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. And so we do have 3 options for return right now for students, and these are provided to us from the Department of Health, and they were part of the governor's executive order. We have a day 8 option, a day 11, and a day 15. And really, if you come back on day 8 or 11, that's where the enhanced precautions come into play, and they're listed down below. And you'll see that face coverings would need to be required at all times. Students would also remain 3 feet distance from other students. And then lunch is really the big one, where they need to stay 6 feet away because they remove their mask to eat. And that's what's been a little harder to manage, is as we've gotten these larger quarantine numbers, this puts a lot on our building principals and teachers to manage this. It's something they're doing. They're doing it to the best of their ability and the time and the space they have available. But it's something we are continuing right now because we want to get students back as fast as we can into that traditional environment and in a safe manner. And so this is one that is a struggle. It's something they're going to need your help with, especially our parents. If you're returning a student on one of these days, we really need you to have a talk with your child. They also need to help us in this enhanced precaution process. They need to be accountable, and they need to be there and understand that they have to follow these guidelines. Because we're using these, we've had some students who aren't following these guidelines as well as they should be. And so we've actually decided that we're going to give every student a good chance. We're going to give them a warning. We're going to contact their parents and say, hey, you know, your student wasn't following the precautions that we've outlined for them. If they continue to non-comply, we're going to have to ask them to serve their quarantine from home. We've just got to take, you know, the compliance to this has got to happen. This is something we are providing. Not every school is providing this at this time. It's something we're able to here at Center Grove, and we're only able to do that because of our great faculty and our staff members that are making this happen. And they need your help. It needs to be a team effort on this. And I hope I answered all those questions. Definitely feel free to chime in there, Ms. Norman, or if anyone else, if I missed something on that one.
Yeah, no, I think that's, you know, that's the key to this. This is a group effort to get these kids back as quickly as we can. You know, and I understand with our younger kids, if you know that you have a young elementary student and that wearing a mask for them, you know, for those extra days is, you know, going to be complicated, you know, then maybe those early returns are not the best options. I also would say that because of what we're seeing happening in our schools, I would really talk to your students about the fact that, you know, we are more than likely going to have to require masks at some point in each building, depending on how things go. I think it's best to give people heads up about that. I think it's best for people to understand that. You know, and we need your help with that. You know, I don't think personally that it's fair to kids to just be like, well, tomorrow, you know, you've got to get that mask on. So we need parents to kind of work with us so that they understand, you know, so that if your school building gets to that point, your student's ready to go and understands why they're doing what they're doing. The other point I guess I would like to point out, like looking at this slide, is when we talk about what fully vaccinated means. Fully vaccinated is you have, if it's with students, it would have to be the 2-dose vaccine for most of them. They have to have that second dose, and that fully vaccinated component would be 14 days after they've received that second dose. Just to kind of clarify, you know, what we're talking about when we discuss that. So, but this is a team effort. You know, we want the students to come back. I understand that your students, you know, are doing well at home, but I have had scenarios where kids are asymptomatic and they're going for the day 8 option and they test positive. So it's, you know, this is still something that you can't just look at somebody and say, oh, that's what COVID looks like. It unfortunately is something that it's not that simple. So.
Thank you. Okay. Stacy, what questions do we have before we move on to the board meeting?
There are several relating to close contacts. A couple of them are all of the close contacts notified, even if they are vaccinated? So would you notify them?
Yes.
And then
yes.
Also, do you have any idea of the percentage of close contacts that are testing positive? I know it's higher than last year.
It is higher than last year. I think I was asked this question yesterday, and if I remember correctly, I would have to run my numbers to be exact, but I think we're running around 2 to 3% have who were identified as a close contact in school have subsequently had a positive test resulting after that. In regards to the first question, remind me what that one was again. Oh, the notifications. Yes. Yes. So we are notifying everyone if there is a close contact, regardless of your vaccination status, regardless if we know that you tested positive 6 months ago. I think it's very important that parents know that even if your student is not required to quarantine, that your student was a close contact. So that information goes out in the emails that through the notifications through Parent Square of an evening. So it's kind of two separate, you know, there's 2 separate types of notifications. There's one that says that your student is required to quarantine. There's a second one that says, you know, we know that your student has proof of vaccination or has tested positive within the past 6 months. So, and that again has to be an independent test. It can't be an at-home test for in the past 6 months. I've also received a couple questions. Just I've had some folks who have questioned how we were able to how we were able to know that their student was already vaccinated. So school corporations have access to what's called CHIRP, which is Children and Hoosiers Immunization Reporting Program. And that is the state immunization database. And that information, along with it's primarily used in regard to school required vaccinations and things of that sort. But like, for example, my vaccines are part of that, that I can then look myself up if I needed to. Parents can have access to that. I believe you can get like a PIN number from the state so that it's helpful when you need to be able to show proof of your vaccination status. But that's one of the ways, if you've not presented a card to us, that we would know that information regarding your student.
So another question was, are you seeing documented spread within school buildings this year?
I'm not sure how we would classify documented spread. Are we seeing, students test positive in a classroom? Yes. Are we seeing their close contacts test positive? Sometimes. Are we seeing situations where 3 separate corners of the room have a student that's tested positive? Yes, we have seen that. That's usually when it results in a room being closed. Can that be attributed only to the school building? I don't think so. I think if we were doing a testing program in the schools, I think we would be able to give some indication of that. But with as much community spread as we have, with as much activity as people are involved in, I don't know that you can pinpoint it just being the school. I think that it's something that it's everywhere. So could it be because you were playing soccer with somebody who later tested positive? Well, yes, it could be. So I don't know that we can necessarily scientifically prove that it's only happening in the buildings.
The other question was related to masks and if that will impact who is quarantined.
At this time, it is still 3 feet. I guess from my standpoint and what I'm seeing, and again, this is more of an anecdotal type of thing, so take it for what it is. Last year when we did quarantines, when we were wearing face coverings, I was very confident that students were not going to have symptoms and students were not going to be sick. This year, I'm not confident of that. I think that, will it change what we do with quarantine? No. At this point, we're still at 3 feet, whether we have masks on or not. Can I say that I think with face coverings on, that the likelihood that your student's going to have symptoms, I think that would definitely decrease because of the face coverings. We have a lot of skunk going around the schools, whether it's COVID, whether it's there's a really nasty cold thing that's going on that is not COVID, but it is, very similar. I think that we would see that type of stuff reduce because we saw that happen last year with face coverings. Like I said, last year, if we had a quarantine, it was because we had to quarantine. I didn't have as many comments as what I receive now from families saying, oh, my student's actually not been feeling well. That wasn't something that we had last year. Last year, I just had a lot of people who were just angry because their healthy kids were home. And unfortunately, this year, I'm not seeing that same trend.
Another question is, can vaccinations be required and will they be required?
That would be something for the state to determine. I mean, that's not something I think that individual school corporations will do. All of the vaccinations that we currently have that are required vaccinations for school are from the Department of Health. And so if the Department of Health were to require a vaccination, then that would be a school required vaccination. For example, meningococcal B is not a required vaccination for students. Is it a good idea? Probably so, especially if you're going into the military or you're going to college, but the state health department does not require that one. So they just recommend it.
Another question about if we were to go to an e-learning or hybrid model, could the vaccinated students still go to school?
That's a
Not in
great
our current-
question. That's
yeah.
above me.
I would say that's not
yeah.
included here. Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah,
Harper.
I was going to say that would be something we would look at. I would assume it would get to that point, but it's not something we've discussed at this time.
I think our concern is, as I mentioned earlier, we have vaccinated individuals still testing positive, and so they're carrying the virus. Now they're safe. The vaccines kept them safe. I think the breakthrough data would show that, but we'd still be worried about spread between individuals in that situation.
Correct.
And a few questions for you, Dr. Hoover, related to how kids are supposed to get their work if they are quarantined as close contacts or if their classroom is closed.
For classrooms that have closed, we are going to e-learning, and so they'll be working with their teacher in Canvas. And that will be their go-to for getting those assignments, meeting with teachers, learning about opportunities for support. For students who are quarantined, again, just working with teachers. I know teachers are working to get things in two ways. A lot of it's going on Canvas, but especially in middle school, in our elementary schools, there's still some things that are paper, whether that's a book they're reading in the class that's at school and not at home, or a packet. And that's just, well, I ask parents to work with teachers to get those materials and keep up the best they can and look for opportunities where they can connect with the teacher if they need to do that.
We still have some more questions, but I want to give Dr. Arkanoff time to talk about the board meeting tomorrow.
Sure. So yeah, we'll come back to some of those questions, but those folks that need to drop off, we'll make sure people understand the board meeting for tomorrow night. So the board meeting will be tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at Center Grove High School. You'll enter through door 9, which is the Hall of Excellence. Be aware that it's in the high school cafeteria because the high school auditorium has something going on that we couldn't move because we've moved it about 3 times, so we weren't going to move it again. So the high school cafeteria will be set up when you come in and you would like to come to speak. You need to be there. The sign-up sheet will be out 30 minutes ahead of time. It will have on there some information that you must fill out. If you don't fill out the information, then you won't be chose to speak. Basically, you're going to have your first and last name, your street address, and you'll need to check a box whether you're speaking as a community member, a parent, a staff member, or a student, and you can check all the boxes that apply. You will have 2 check boxes to look at. One will be whether you're in support, you want to speak in support of the plan, or if you want to speak in opposition of the plan. Even if you are, say, in support of the plan, but have some criticisms of the plan, that's okay. But if your overall is in support of it, then that's what you would check. If you feel like you're more in just opposition of the entire plan, then please check that box. No other topics will be addressed at that time. The board is only having this community input in regards to the plan. So please don't come and think you want to address some other random topic. The board wants to hear from the community only in regards to the plan. Again, it's really important that you fill out the document completely. Mrs. Parker will be there ahead of time to make sure and advise you. Please work with her. You know, she's the messenger, so be kind and work with her as she will make sure everyone gets an opportunity to put their name on the document. It'll be one line. It'll be a first come, first serve. However, the board, it will be going back and forth between in support and opposition. The board plans to extend the time for the community input. This is not a public forum. It's still a board meeting because the board will be taking a vote. So they're sticking to their policy, which is currently 3 minutes per person for 15 minutes total. I believe they're going to extend that by an additional 15 minutes. They'll vote on that night. They'll extend the time by 15 minutes, and that will allow another roughly 5 more people to speak. So if you get there and you get in line and it's obviously that there's 100 people wanting to sign up, you probably realize that you've probably not made it in time to get up to speak. It's really difficult to try and have the time in place to listen to, hundreds of people speak. Therefore, that's why we're having this forum where you can hear and we can answer questions. It's also why, it's important that you continue to email the board to share out your concerns, your input, your support of, or your opposition to the school plan. So those are other ways to reach out to the board, but obviously having a meeting and trying to hear from hundreds of people would just not be feasible to do in an evening. So the board's going to do everything they can to try and equal out who they're hearing in opposition and who they're hearing in support of the plan. Each person will be given 3 minutes. If you are early and you sign up and you choose to yield your time to someone else, time does not accumulate in this. So basically you're only giving up your 3 minutes to another person for 3 minutes. You're not giving another person 6 minutes. So I just want to be clear on that. So that's the board policy and the practice they plan on using tomorrow night. Again, it will be in the cafeteria. It will be streamed. The meeting will be streamed, and we'll have information on that later so that you can watch. Participating in public will only be in person. There will not be an opportunity to participate in public virtually. So if you want to participate virtually or you're not comfortable coming to the meeting, then I suggest you use email and send an email to the board. Some folks have asked about video. If you want to record a video and send that to the school board via email, absolutely, we'll watch it. We'll read them, the emails, we'll watch the videos if that's what you want to send. We'll not present videos that night or emails to the board. They've received those already. So, we're not going to make any kind of formal presentation to any additional public comment, only the public comment of the folks that come and provide that in the meeting. So Stacy, did I miss anything else in that?
The question about masks, will masks be required for the meeting?
At this point, the high school is under the percentage. We do not intend for folks to wear masks. I mean, obviously we encourage them especially if we're going to have that many people there. And a lot of you may never have been around each other before. So it would be a good idea to wear masks, but it's not a requirement. It'll definitely be optional. Again, it is a voluntary activity. So people have the option to watch online. They don't have to come. But the mask situation would be still optional at this time. Other questions or comments about the board meeting? And it is at 7 p.m. and it is tomorrow night, the 26th.
Some were asking how they email the board.
Well, they can go onto the website and see the board. There's a board email. I believe still, right? Is there one email, Stacy,
Yeah.
still that they can email the entire board? Yeah, or they can individually email all of them. And it's just their last name with their first initial at centergrove.k12.us. And you can email all of us, or if you want to email just one board member, you can do that. And Mr. Russell is our board president and does seem to receive most of the emails along with me. But either way, the board does a really good job of sharing all the emails they have with each other and myself. Any other questions about the board meeting? Okay, just a few comments about the board meeting. I've received some emails of folks that are afraid to come to the board meeting. If you've looked around the state and you've seen on, in the media of what's happening at board meetings, I can understand why people are afraid and why they're nervous. So, we've had board meetings here, the last couple of them, that we've dealt with, what I would say controversial issues in a very respectful way. I'm very proud of our community to continue that. So I believe that's the case, even though we would have even a larger crowd on such a tense topic. I do have faith that our community will be responsible and respectful in the meeting. Mr. Russell will be conducting the meeting as the board president. It's going to be extremely important that people do not, have outbursts during the meeting. It's going to be hard to hear. It's going to be recorded and being streamed online. So any kind of ancillary noise will make it hard for people to hear at home, and it will make it hard for people at the front of the meeting, the board members and myself, to hear any comments that are being shared out by the public. So please remember that when you come tomorrow night, that we ask that it be respectful. And I know that it's been continued to be done that way. So I'm looking forward to that. But as you know, many school districts around the state have had some extremely bad experiences, and we want to keep it positive here at Center Grove. Okay, I think we're going to go back to a few of the questions. Is that correct? Do we have a few more questions on the plan itself, or
There are just several questions about contact tracing. And obviously, I know, Amy, you measure, but you do also ask students about who their close contacts are, their friends, things like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about your process?
Yeah, we can talk about the process a little bit. So obviously we rely a lot on seating charts, things like that. We also rely on the students regarding, who have they been eating lunch with. We have tried to, for the school to issue the quarantine, it needs to be that it was contact at school. For example, if they ride in a car with somebody, then that's something we're going to notify them. My hope is that students are talking to their friends, because honestly, those if they had a sleepover Saturday night and they woke up feeling crummy Sunday, and they test positive Tuesday, they should be contacting the people who they had the sleepover with to let them know, so that those kids can quarantine. That's not the function of the school to institute that, but my hope is that that they would feel comfortable enough with their friends to do that, so that their friends can then take those extra steps to stay home, monitor themselves, and then that eliminates us having to have issues at school. But so that, like at each level is a little bit different. Obviously at elementary level, we're relying on the seating charts. Most of those kids are potted as well, so they're kind of hanging out with the same people all day. That's, who they eat lunch with is usually who they're sitting next to in class. Middle school, same thing. We're utilizing the seating charts. They have, I think, seating charts for lunch as well. And then at the high school, it's a little bit more difficult. There's a lot more movement, a lot more freedom. We do rely on the students to talk to us. We also, at times, if it's, for example, there have been a few where we had a really large lunch group. And so, trying to weed down the group to determine, were they all fitting that definition of what a close contact would be. We at times will bring in those other students to see if they would identify themselves as being in close contact with anyone, and then kind of determine from there where things are at. So do we interview every single, kid who's a close contact at the high school? We'll know. There's some situations where they sit, 22 inches from the kid next to them in class. So that's just, unfortunate that was the student they happened to be sitting by in class. So that's a close contact. But when the students call into us, we do ask them about who they sit with on the bus. We do ask them about who they maybe are having lunch with. And then we also will have their friends will contact us and be like, yeah, we all went out for pizza the night before, and we all rode in the same car together. So, that's kind of how that process works. I think it's important for everybody to be kind to one another. When somebody, when a friend contacts you to say, look, I'm sick, I have COVID, they're doing that out of caring for the other individuals. And so it's important to take that seriously and to respect that. I know that there have been some situations where families have not been overly kind to one another because of, it potentially affecting other activities that the friends are doing. And I think that that's really unfortunate. We're all in this together, and we want to try to make this the safest place that we can. And my hope is that, we can try to find these people, we can try to minimize this so that we don't have these issues and we don't have to talk about e-learning and those types of things, but it's going to take all of us working together to get to that point.
Another question about exclusions. Obviously, you're saying that vaccinated students and staff members can carry the virus, but yet they are not required to quarantine. Whose rule is that? Can you explain that a little bit?
That is the CDC and the Johnson County Health Department. At this time, vaccinated individuals are, we are to notify them of the close contact. The CDC recommends that anybody who is vaccinated, who is identified as a close contact, would consider getting tested 3 to 5 days after that exposure and then wear a mask for like that 14-day period. If you're listed as a close contact and you're vaccinated, my request has been, I would encourage people to wear masks, that way they're kind of, if they were to be somebody who was an asymptomatic carrier, they're kind of at least minimizing what's going out to other people. Again, there's a lot of debate over whether it's, it has to be, it's a required thing or not. When people ask my opinion, I'm always an encourager of wearing a mask for a lot of reasons. And it was prior to COVID and it will probably continue after COVID. So, I think that is, but right now that's the guidance that is out there in regards to vaccinated people, and that's what we're following.
Another person has asked about the improvements in air ventilation. I don't know if Dr. Long is still with us, but if you would want to talk about that and the improvements that have happened. I know some of the CARES Act dollars have gone toward that.
Sure. We've increased the the amount of outside air that's flowing in. We've also been able, in most of our buildings, been able to treat that air through a UVC filter that all of the air. Some of our classrooms, we're in the process of doing all of them, have a UVC light in there so that's active when the lights are on. And we're still working on getting all those in. But primarily with new up-to-date HVAC systems, increases the volume of outside air, but it also treats the existing air that we have in each of our buildings.
And a question, Jason, I think you had this on one of your slides, but has the Department of Education talked about how COVID absences will be counted yet?
They haven't. To our knowledge, we're continuing to track and we'll report them like we did last year. I've got a little note after our meeting last night to give them a call this morning and see if we can get that finalized and resolved by tomorrow night's meeting. I hope to be able to share that. Last year, COVID-related absences were exempt. So we have always had excused and unexcused absences. And then they also had an exempt category for those. And we're hoping they'll continue that this year. I just want to get some solid clarification on that. And plan to do that after this coffee chat this morning.
I think also in regards to like quarantined students, you know, especially like for close contact at school, they are supposed to still be participating in their classes as though they are present in class. So.
And Dr. Arkin, I have a couple questions about the board meeting. First of all, where will the public comment be? Will it be before or after the presentation? And then will there be any security at the meeting?
Yes, so yes, there will be security at the meeting. Senator Police Department will be there. And also the presentation will be first on the agenda, or I'm sorry, the public input will be first on the agenda. That's the normal process. So that will be the first piece.
And another follow-up to the air improvements. They were asking about air improvements at the high school. How much of that has been done?
I think that's a Dr. Long question, isn't it?
Yeah, we've replaced the majority of the air handling units at the high school as part of our ongoing renovation process. I couldn't give you an exact number of units that have been replaced, but I think during this phase, we replaced the last two that needed to be replaced, but I'd have to check on that to be 100% sure.
Okay. All right, well, it's a little bit after 9, and I want to thank everyone for attending. Again, reminder, the board meeting Thursday, August 26th. Sign-up sheet will not be out until 6:30 p.m., but you will be able to start lining up there to sign up. As you can tell, and you can do the math, it's about 15 minutes. If it gets extended to an additional 15 minutes, that's 30. That's a total of 10 individuals that will be able to speak. And as I shared, the board's going to be going through and trying to make sure that they balance it with those in support and those in opposition to the plan. So please sign up. If you want to sign up, even though you know you might not get to speak, that's fine too, just if you want to be on the record that you had wanted to speak. So we'll have plenty of sheets out there for the sign up, but Mrs. Parker will manage it all. But I think that's it. Again, I look forward to seeing you on August 26th, tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the high school cafeteria. I want to thank everyone here this morning, all of our parents who have attended, and of course, everyone of the panelists for being here and all the work that you guys have been doing. I just want to say how much I appreciate it. It's a tough year, 2 now, 3. Hopefully we can, get through this and put this behind us and get back to a better normal way of life. So thank you again for all that you do. And folks, we'll talk to you later. This recording will be posted here shortly. So thank you.